to sit down. All right, are we on? Okay, well, good morning. It is good to see you all here this morning. We want to remember that we have a number of our associate class members and our regular class members who are watching the streaming, and we appreciate them at the same time. So when you get a chance, remind them that there are vacant chairs here. Gary is calling almost daily trying to remind people of that. That is right, isn't it, Gary?
Couldn't be further from the truth.
I had to block him on my phone because I got tired.
All right, as is our custom, we need to know what's going on so we can share it, and this class serves as an outlet apparently for a lot of the things that people want to know is going on in this church. Eddie's got his hand up because he's determined to be first today.
Last one, you was talking about empty chairs. I seen on the Church of Christ a long time ago a sign said the most expensive thing in a church is an empty pew. And so I thought about that when you said that empty chair.
And you decided to go over to the Church of Christ and help?
Yep, I've been there before. I ain't got a thing against Church of Christ. Not one thing.
You like to hear their organ play, don't you?
Yes. Yes, I do.
All right. What other announcements do we have that we want to share? Tick, 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 tick.
Yeah. Well, Sherry wants to let everybody to know that she's sad that she's not here today, but she's in atrial fibrillation, and she's been in it for a little while, so there may be some options that we may have to think about doing next week.
Okay.
And she wants to tell everybody hello, and she wished that she was here.
Okay. So we need to remember Sherry as she struggles with some AFib, and look for the right method of handling that.
Right.
What's your name? Myra wants to be recognized.
I have a praise. My brother's band is out and he's awake. So.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, her brother had gallbladder surgery, and as a result of that, he had some anaphylactic shock that caused them to have to put him on a ventilator for a little while. And what she's just telling us is he is now 1 off the ventilator and 2 awake. All right. We're glad to hear that. Other matters that you all want to share?
Beth.
I'm sorry. Bill and I had a praise yesterday. We just found out that we're going to be great-grandparents again. Our grandson who lives in California, and him and his wife came in to announce that they're going to have a little girl. So we're real proud.
All right. Well, we're glad to hear that. Catch Gail while she's back there.
Our oldest son, Brad, his wife's mother passed away this week, Helen Rice.
Helen Rice.
Rice, she
Okay.
used to work for the post office, and people may have known her there.
Okay. All
She
right.
lived here, she had cancer for 3.5 years.
All right. So we'll need to remember that family in our prayers. Other matters that you all want to share? Nancy, are you up or not?
Yes,
Okay.
the Fellowship of Christian Athletes is having a breakfast this Saturday at the community center here, and they're needing some help from the women. You don't have to cook or anything, but we just have to be there to serve. And it's going to be for 40 ministries in this area, and they have to be there at 7:30, and probably end up at 10. But they need to sort of let me know they need 3 more people, 3 more women.
All right. So those of you who can help out with that service, Nancy will be glad to take your name down and count on you being there next Saturday at 7:30 in the morning. Nick Drury.
About 10 days, we're both finally out of the hospital and at home.
All right. So
They haven't fixed the problem in the colon, but the pain is much less. And
she's at home, so she's happy.
Okay, so we'll need to remember Gwen and Robert as they struggle with that. Other matters that you all want to share?
We have family in Portugal for 2 weeks. Our youngest son, Adam, his family of 6, and his mother-in-law and father-in-law. They are over there because, for vacation, and also because our son's brother-in-law is a missionary over there with his family of 5.
I hope he's got a big house.
Well, he has an apartment, and they're in an apartment too.
All right, so it is good to hear about families getting together that way and sharing with one another. Pat Browder.
Thank everybody for their prayers for John and for me. I haven't bent my cane on his head yet, so that's good. Progress is being made, but he's doing pretty good. It's gonna be a long time for those nerves to heal.
Okay, so we need to keep John and Pat in our prayers. Other matters that you all want to share? Jane.
Lucy, June. I talked with Lucy Bell this morning, and she said that while Jimmy's pneumonia seems to be improving, so the nurses are telling her that he had a good night and ate a breakfast this morning, so maybe he's able to kick the pneumonia.
For those
She
of you
appreciates everybody's prayers.
who haven't heard, while Jimmy is continuing to struggle with his regular problems, he did develop a little spate of pneumonia, and they've been actively treating that, and obviously they're making some headway, but we need to keep them in our prayers as well. Other matters that you want to share?
I mentioned our grandson, Bruce there a few weeks ago, but he won a speech camp kind of thing up in Calvin Coolidge, I think is the name of the organization, but it's in Vermont, and he had to compete in speeches and stuff, and he qualified. He got this free trip, so he's left yesterday, flew up to Philadelphia and then Boston, and then now he's in Vermont for a week. So we just hope, we're thankful that he was able to do it, but then he's away from home for the first time. He's not quite 18, and on his own, and we just want safety and stuff for him. And also, the reason we're late this morning, we were coming down Sexton Loop, and there was a tree down across the road on top of the house, and a power line down. So.
Can I get under that? I said, turn around.
But I don't know whose house that was, but those people,
Bad situation for them.
bad situation for them.
Sure. Other matters that you all want to share? There's some discussion about Joy Billings.
A tree landed on her house too.
And her and Billings had to go someplace else because it's unlivable apparently right now. So
Okay.
that's all I know.
Okay, so the Billings apparently have had a tree to fall on their house, causing them to have to leave the house. And that's not easy for him right at the moment anyhow. Other matters that you all want to share? Well, what am I missing? Okay, hey, couldn't see you. That's what Danny's for.
Along with Karen was saying about our grandchildren, our grandson Levi is still in Alaska doing a college internship. And as a grandma, that really, his safety is my prayer too.
Well, of course. All right. We need to keep Levi in our prayers while he does his internship. Other matters that you all want to share? Where am I going? Lily.
This class has a praise. Mildred Butler is with us this morning.
What Mildred really wanted to do was to come in, sit down, enjoy your all's company, and not have fingers pointed at her. Is that correct, Mildred? But we are glad to see you here this morning. other matters that you all want to share? Does that have it? All right. Dennis, would you lead us in a word of opening prayer?
Absolutely. Heavenly Father, as always, we thank you for the ability to gather together as free men and women to be able to study your word and to glean the meaning such that we can take it and go out into the world and help build your kingdom here on earth. We raise up all these people that we have talked about this morning to you for your healing touch. We know that you are, in fact, the great physician, and if it's your will, you can make all these folks better with just a thought and just a word. But we also know that you do everything for a reason. There is purpose behind everything you do, and that we ask for the wisdom and the strength to be able to glean that purpose and that wisdom from whatever it is that you do. Please help the families of the people we have raised up to you today. Give them the strength and the perseverance to be able to see this through. Help us to be as helpful as possible and offer any assistance that we can to these families in need, and just be the loving arms and the loving hands and the loving embrace to all these folks and their families and all the other people out there in the community that need you as well. And it's in Jesus' name we pray all these things. Amen.
This is, of course, the time of year when we take special pleasure in remembering the blessings that we enjoy being a people of the United States of America. We hear almost daily people talking about the subject of immigration. And I would point out to you today about that issue that in spite of the fact that we have people who are critical of our country, of our leadership, of our leaders, of us individually, it is still better than any place else on earth, and that is why they continue to come. Those people who are coming to try to live here in America are coming here because they have heard that this is a place that God has blessed. The problem is, of course, that it is somewhat fragile, because that's what happened with the children of Israel too. God gave that group of people a place. God had lots of places, and He chose that place for them, and He has chosen this place for us, and we are continually proud of the fact that we are able to live in what we call the land of the free and the home of the brave. Last night, Jane and I stumbled on a movie that was produced as a result of a book that was written as a result of some real things that happened in World War II. Some of you all have read the book, some of you all have seen the movie. Some of you all are old enough to remember what happened in World War II. The name of the book and the movie is The Monuments Men. I point that out to you because I think it has some special significance here today in this lesson that we are extracting from the 18th chapter of Jeremiah. When you start with, we were in chapter 12 last week, and starting with 13, we have a series of what the theologians called oracles, and you and I would call stories or sometimes sermons, but they're nonetheless descriptive ideas God in chapter 13 has told Jeremiah to go get a piece of a linen belt and to wrap it around him and to wear it. And the way that Jeremiah tells the story, he did what God told him to do, and he wore it for a while, and then God told him, go and hide this linen belt in a hole in the ground. And he did. And then an indeterminate period of time went by, and God told Jeremiah to go back and dig it up. And he did. And it had deteriorated to nothing. Belt only had one purpose, that was to hold his britches up. And it became useless. How did it become useless? Oh, come on. It became useless through lack of use. Now, before he buried it, it had probably gotten dirty and ragged and so forth, but it was still useful. And the place where it got buried sort of springboards off of what the pastor told us last week, coming out of Luke 13, where Jesus is passing by and he's telling the story about the fig tree, and the fig tree wasn't bearing any fruit. You know, there are three things that can happen to a plant. It can bear good fruit, it can bear bad fruit. Y'all with me so far? No fruit at all. And the funny part about that is that's the way we are also. Is that we can bear good fruit and bad fruit or no fruit at all. So, skipping over 3 or 4 chapters from the linen belt, Jeremiah tells a series of these stories saying, you know how Jesus used to say it, the kingdom of heaven is like. And then he'd tell a story. Because the people didn't want to be preached to, but they loved to hear little stories. And so the story that he tells here in 18, he says, this is the word that came to Jeremiah from the Lord. Go down at once to the potter's house, and there I will reveal my words to you. So I went down to the potter's house, and there he was, working away at his wheel. But the jar that he was making from the clay became flawed in the potter's hand, so he made it into another jar as it seemed right for him to do. I stopped for a second because what's the potter working with? What is the substance? What?
Clay.
Clay. I don't know if any of you all have ever heard about it, but people are sometimes accused of having clay feet. Well, isn't that interesting? As a matter of fact, all of us have clay feet. And one of the things that we know as we live life is that somebody's willing to point out our clay feet at the drop of a hat. It's called magnification, and we are good at it. Now, there are two kinds of magnification. If you take a pot, and you look at it, like it is in here in this picture, incidentally, what were pots first made for? What? To carry water. To put something in them and to carry it. Pots had to first be useful. And then, of course, humans being humans, we said not only do they have to be useful, but they need to be pretty. Nancy said beautiful. I just shortcut that because I couldn't spell beautiful. I could say pretty. They had to be pretty. And early on, the potters began to make a pot like this, and then to support the little pot, what did they put on it? Feet. They put feet on it. I don't know how many of you all have ever had an antique. I grew up with antiques. Mother would go everywhere in the world she could. She could find antiques anywhere. And one of the things that Mother and her antiques were, Mother was never bothered about the imperfections in the antique. And if she found a little piece of pottery and it had one of the feet and it was cracked, she brought it home anyway. You all have never done that, I understand. And never did any of that at that place up in Knoxville that you worked, did they?
Lots of times.
Hairline cracks. They might even leak. Is that right, Mariah? Myra, where the water in the pot leaks out? The point is that the pot can have imperfections. The pot needs to be useful. It's all right for the pot to be pretty, but the pot needs to be useful. And we have a bad habit. We must have picked this up. You know, you got this angel on one side and this devil on the other, and it depends on who you listen to. You ever wandered around and looked at other people and said, let me see if I can magnify the good that's in them? Or, did you see what they did when I was growing up? The big deal in Major League Baseball was the Yankees playing in the American League and the Dodgers playing in the National League. Any of you men remember that? And every year they'd show up in September, because they did it in September back then, to play some kind of a game. They called it the World Series. And in my school, in the 50s, I don't know about you all, but transistor radios had just come in. And so you could sneak a radio in to shop, where we're supposed to be making stuff, you know. But we were listening to the ball game while the teacher was over there at the other end. And I was a big Yankees fan. And there was a player on that team, and his name was
Mickey Mantle.
Mickey Mantle.
Number 5.
My guy. I loved it when Mickey Mantle was up to bat. And one of the things about Mickey Mantle and the game was he actually struck out more than he hit the ball. Did y'all know that? Now, that's true of every baseball player, but it was Mickey. He struck out more than he hit the ball. But he got up every time his time was ready to try. Now, I could stop with that lesson, right? That's the way we live our lives. We probably strike out more than we hit the ball, but we only got 2 choices. One is to play on, and the other one is to quit. Mickey Mantle didn't quit. Now, where I'm going with this is, Mickey Mantle was my hero. We need heroes. We grow up needing heroes. God knows we needed heroes. God has given us heroes sprinkled all through the Bible. Not one of which didn't have clay feet. And God doesn't hide that. He tells us about the mistakes, the wrong choices that His people made while they were doing the thing that needed doing. It didn't matter whether there was one person or a whole nation. God kept on keeping on, gave us heroes, and told us, draw your inspiration where you will. You can be inspired that David killed Goliath. You can put David down because of his actions with Bathsheba. You can be inspired by Abraham following when God says go. Or you can point the magnifying glass to Abraham getting down into Egypt and saying, you know, I think they're going to kill me, so I'm going to let the Pharaoh have my wife. Everybody has clay feet. God knows that because He started making each one of us just like this, just like what's up on the screen. And imperfections would crop up. I don't know where all the imperfections crop up. I do notice that they do from time to time. I notice them more in the imperfections that crop up in you all. I don't need any help focusing on the imperfections that crop up in me, although I seem to have a lot of help about that. God is a God who has given us promises. And He has told us He wants us to be about our Father's business. Back to the monuments meeting. The way the story sets out, in World War II, the Germans were not content with conquering territory, with subjugating people, with disposing of whole races of people. That wasn't enough for the Nazi leadership. They were also a little on the greedy side. And they decided, we want to possess the art that is all over Europe. And so they sent soldiers to confiscate what belonged to somebody else and carry it away to hide it in a hole. It's sort of like the linen. You get the picture. And the way the story sets up, the military, whichever army it is, whichever country is running it, they're trying to recapture the land, they're trying to free the people, they're trying to run off the oppressors. And these 7 men looked around and says, our memories as evidenced by this art are important to us. They form the being of who we are because we can look and see what people have done, good, bad, or indifferent. They can see the beauty. But more than anything else, they can remember. So 7 of them went out to try to save all of the art. I thought 7 was an interesting number. I don't know whether some Jewish guy was involved in picking out the number or not, but there were 7 of them. And you all know the story, of course. They managed to find, hidden in salt mines and copper mines and all kinds of mines where they would just be put away, all of these pieces of art that represented something to somebody else, represented nothing more than value to the people who were putting them away. And they got them back. They got lots of them back. Lots of them they didn't get back. But here's the point that I want you to notice. In the story there were 7. And they started with the guy who was in charge saying, we need to go find these things, but remember, no piece of art is worth a human life. And they ran that thread all the way through the book and all the way through the movie. Except that, of the 7, 2 of them got killed doing it. God does not promise skies always blue, flowers flown pathways all the way through. 2 of them died. And they tied this together at the end of the story by saying, well, was it worth it? And this old man comes back after all this was over, and he is in Belgium, and he is looking at a statue that Michelangelo did of Madonna and Child, which I thought was an interesting choice. Was it worth it? Yes, it was. That's the story for us today as Christians. As we travel through life, is it worth it to stay on the right path? Or do we take the easy way? Jeremiah, as you read through this entire book, as a matter of fact, at the tail end of chapter 18, after he has told about God saying, I'm in charge of this pot. And this can be Bobby Collier's big pot or his little pot. This can be you, or this can be the nation. This can be God's people. This can be the church. God is in charge of these things, and God can do what he's going to do. He does this funny thing about this free will and choice and stuff like that, where he gives us the opportunity to make our decisions, and then sits around and says, well, that didn't work too well. Let's see. Back to remaking the pot. Because the real point about all of this is God doesn't give up on us. With me so far? Do you all agree with that God doesn't give up on us? Yes. Go thou and do likewise. It is very easy to give up on the people who have got clay feet. It is very easy to give up on the people who are doing things wrong. It is very easy to see the imperfections in other people's lives, and Jesus even spoke up about it. Something about mote and beam. You remember that? God doesn't give up on us. We should not give up on one another. What's been how have we run this thing through? I know the plans I have for you. The sub-theme, there's only 2 things you need to do. God says, don't hurt yourself. Don't hurt others. Some of them deserve to be helped. I'm just being God's policeman. He wants me to help. I need to straighten some of you all out. You see, God promises to be with us. He promised to be with the Jews. He promised to give us, who are followers of his kingdom, his presence. Now, what he doesn't promise us is what we would call smooth sailing. I've had a little of that. I've told you the story before because I don't have any new stories, but Jane and I were in the Gulf of Mexico with a friend of ours, and we were sailing one day. And we loved to sail. It was a lot of fun. You could get a breeze up that was going 10 or 15 knots and get the boat cocked over to about a 20-degree heel and just going just smooth, no noise. Absolutely fantastic. Or you can get out there like we did one day, and the wind was blowing up closer to 25 or 30 knots. and there was a short chop in the sea where we were getting 8 and 10 foot seas about 25 feet apart, and the boat was only 30 feet long. So, and we're trying to get sails up or down any way at all that we can deal with it, trying to navigate by an engine, except that the way the waves were going, the boat would go up and then down, and the whole tail end of the boat would be out of the water. That's where the rudder was that you steer with. That's where the prop was that you gain power from. So it was just flopping everywhere. And this friend of ours, it was his boat. He put Jane back on the tiller, and he says, "You steer." I don't know if any of y'all have ever seen Jane's eyes when they were this big around. But he and I were up there trying to do stuff with the sails. And he looked at me, and he looked at Jane, and he says, "You know, this isn't fun." Life is like that. God knows that life is like that. Sometimes it's not fun. Sometimes He hasn't promised us skies always blue. But He has promised to be there with us. You will be my people, and I will be your God. We know that. And we also know what